Have you ever woken up from a really weird dream and just thought, where did that come from? Or maybe you've had that moment where you blurt something out before you even realize you're thinking it. Well, that's it. That's the strange, wonderful, and sometimes frustrating machine that is your mind, working away in the background. And understanding how that machine works, that's the grand adventure of psychology. I mean, think about this for a second. The lump of tissue between your ears is, as far as we know, the single most complex object in the entire known universe. The rules that run it are so mysterious, so deep, it's possible our brains aren't even built to fully understand themselves. But that has never, ever stopped us from trying. And that drive to understand ourselves has pushed us to ask some of the biggest questions you can possibly imagine. Are you really in the driver's seat of your own life? Do we actually have free will? What is it that separates a healthy mind from one that's struggling? And how can we help? And maybe the biggest one of all, what is this feeling of being you? These are the questions that have been fueling psychology from day one. Now, the word psychology itself comes from Latin, and it literally meant the study of the soul. Pretty cool, right? Of course, the definition has gotten a little more scientific over time. Today, the definition we can all pretty much agree on is this. It's the science of behavior and mental processes. It's not just about what we do, but also about all the thinking and feeling that happens on the inside. So, how did we get from this philosophical study of the soul to a real, honest-to-goodness science? Well, that's where the story gets really interesting. It all starts to kick off in the 19th century, when people started thinking, hey, what if we could study the mind with the same tools we use to study, say, biology or chemistry? Now, people have been thinking about this stuff forever, of course. We're talking 2,000 years ago, Chinese rulers were giving their officials the first ever psych exams. Fast forward to the 800s, and you've got this brilliant Persian doctor, Al-Razes, who was actually describing and treating mental illness. But the real game changer, the moment science officially stepped in, was in 1879. A guy named Wilhelm Wundt opens the very first laboratory dedicated only to psychology in Germany. The starting pistol had been fired. And right away, a big debate broke out. On one side, you had Wundt and his idea of structuralism. He basically wanted to break down consciousness into its tiniest parts to find the basic structure of the mind. But then this American philosopher, William James, came along and said, whoa, hold on. I don't care what the mind is, I want to know what it does. His functionalism was all about the why. Why do we think? Why do we feel? What's the purpose of it all? So here's the fatal flaw that basically ended that first debate. Wundt's main method was something called introspection. He'd have people, say, smell a flower, and then try to report on every single little sensation and feeling. The problem? It's totally subjective. My experience of smelling that flower is going to be different from yours. And because you can't actually observe or measure someone's inner feelings scientifically, structuralism just couldn't last. All right, so while the academics were arguing about all this, another person was about to enter the scene and just flip the whole table over. I'm pretty sure you know his name. When most people think psychology, they picture this guy, maybe with a notepad and a couch. Sigmund Freud. Freud's biggest idea actually started with a patient known as Anna O. She had a bunch of mysterious nervous disorders, and her doctor, a colleague of Freud's, decided to try something totally new. He just let her talk. He let her speak freely about whatever came to mind, especially her traumatic memories. And something amazing happened. The more she talked, the more her physical symptoms just faded away. This was the birth of the talking cure. And for Freud, it was a total light bulb moment. And from this, Freud cooked up his most revolutionary theory. He said that all of us are being pushed and pulled by mental forces that we aren't even aware of. This idea that our personalities are shaped by an unconscious mind was an absolute bombshell back in 1900. It meant there was this whole hidden world inside us, pulling the strings. And the impact of that idea was huge. Before Freud, if you had a serious mental illness, you were often just considered broken. You might be confined, even chained to a bed. Freud's psychoanalysis suggested that these problems could actually be healed, not with locks and chains, but through talk, through self-discovery. It was a massive step towards a more humane and hopeful way of treating the mind. But Freud wasn't the last word on the subject. Not by a long shot. As we head into the 20th century, the next big idea was already on its way, and it came from a completely different direction. It was a new school of thought that would challenge everything Freud had built. So this sets up the big showdown of 20th century psychology. In one corner, you've got psychoanalysis, all about the deep, dark, invisible world of the unconscious. And in the other corner, you have behaviorism, led by guys like B.F. Skinner. The behaviorists' whole philosophy was basically, if I can't see it, measure it, and absorb it, it's not science. They tossed out the whole idea of the unconscious and said we should only focus on what we can actually see people do. So who won? Was it Freud or was it Skinner? Well, the really cool answer is neither of them, and also both of them. Psychology didn't just pick a winner. Instead, it did something much smarter. It became what you might call a big old integrated melting pot. It started taking the most useful ideas from all these different perspectives and stirring them together. And that brings us to where we are today. The modern view of psychology really is a mix of the best parts. It has that scientific rigor from the behaviorists, it observes and records behavior, but it also gives credit to our inner life, our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, the stuff Freud was so interested in. It understands that you can't just use one tool to understand the human mind. You have to attack the problem from all sides, with all kinds of different questions. And there's a good reason for all this effort. It's not just psychologists who think this is important. A Harvard astronomer, a man who spent his life looking at galaxies and stars, said it best. After all that, he concluded that the human brain is, by far, the most complex object we've ever found in the entire cosmos. And the most incredible part? We all have one. Each of us is walking around with our own personal cosmos, right here in our heads. So the question this all leads to is a pretty personal one. You are the proud owner of the most complex thing in the known universe. What are you going to do with yours?